Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a pleasure for you to address all the entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, and we really appreciate your sharing the time with us.
Thank you.
As you're aware, this is a very different time from perhaps what anybody or yourself have seen in the earlier days. And I'd like to start off by perhaps an interesting anecdote. You're finding yourself at home right now, and this must be very, very new overall in the last few weeks. How's been your experience working from home?
So there's um, a learning experience which many of you already have because of the business. That has been the way you're living with your Mac Pro out of your briefcase. Your office is where you are, and that has not been the case with me.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been perhaps more old-fashioned. I need to have paper to feel comfortable with a note or to immerse myself in a note rather than look at a screen. But that learning comes pretty fast because we're doing the same thing, and after a few minutes you forget that you're looking at a face on a screen and you're looking at something in real time. Uh, the the catch is that the times are different,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and not only are we looking at a different landscape, but we are looking at uh, ourselves in a landscape that we've never seen before.
In this uh, pandemic, the scenario which seems to be multidimensional, all the other earlier ones, which at least I've seen, are financial in nature, and this one is finance, this one is health, this one is travel, this one is everything you can think of, including the fact that countries are sort of locking down. Entrepreneurs are bucking up, they're cutting costs, um, and trying to obviously survive, in many cases extend the runway. Any view on, obviously there's a lot of hardship in terms of making sure companies keep afloat, but do you see this also as an opportunity uh, for entrepreneurs, and especially in the technology field, as we move forward on a daily basis, trying to combat what is around us?
I think that's a very worthwhile statement to stay with for a while because the people we're dealing with as the young entrepreneurs are people who have found solutions of another way to deal with a problem when it occurs. It's that innovativeness that has enabled some of the young entrepreneurs to um, operate in fields that seem to be sort of very mature, but they have found a means of finding a spot or a niche or a segment that they can operate in differently than the traditional way, and have done exciting things in that manner. So it would be fair to say that we are going to see the same kind of innovativeness created, and it's the same kind of situation like you have heard many times over, that he was looking at a wall, you you found a door in that wall and went through, or a window. How you look at opportunities and how you package them are different. And this situation does give us an opportunity to innovate, but it tests us, and it it involves going through the transformation of looking at a different way to do things, caused by shortages in this case, or caused by uh, strictures or legislation on the other side, new partnerships. Um, Everything's up for grabs.
And again, we are talking about entrepreneurs, we are talking about young entrepreneurs using technology. If I may just take a step back, and the industry, as you call it, the smokestack industry, uh, how does the smokestack industry deal with this? Is it very different? Is it same? Is it innovation, or is it waiting for this to recover?
That's a difficult question to answer, because let's, in the fear of talking specifics, let's take the steel industry.
Okay.
Um, the inputs to make steel available to the customer cheaper or faster are there and have been in use. But there's no clean sheet of paper as another way to make steel.
Right.
And I think there hasn't been a major um, productive input after continuous casting, for example, where you cut out 2 or 3 processes. So it's different in terms of the product you produce, how you're able to sell it, how you're able to deliver it. All of that is much more imaginative with the young entrepreneur that we're talking of, and the new manufacturing systems. The whole supply chain
Hmm.
is changed. I think in many ways, the smokestack industry finds it difficult to change all the entire supply chain. Can improve on it, but it's by and large tweaking it compared to what's happening in the digital area.
However, innovations may be possible in the supply chain, in cutting out inefficiencies in distribution chains, where possibly technology can help.
Yes, in that business area, it could be just as innovative and just as far-reaching in its area, and it would contribute to a smokestack industry and have its effect in that sense. You know, for example,
Mhm.
um, you look at the automobile industry and you look at the changes that are being envisaged today: autonomous driving, um, artificial intelligence being merged in terms of application. Um, the industry was there. You had automobiles. What you're seeing today is a new world application for them of shared mobility. It's something that you would be laughed down 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Um, and yet it's happening in a smokestack industry, being driven. It's, for example, quite conceivable that um, a leading car manufacturer would be a Tesla rather than a Ford or a GM or a Mercedes. And they brought a lot of innovation into the business. And so tomorrow, the largest car maker could be an Apple, because it brings to the table a new approach to doing something. So I think what's happening is the barriers are coming down.
Yeah.
And the one way to look at it is that's being driven by the hardship that we are all facing in the marketplace, caused by a completely different phenomenon, namely a virus that's overtaken the world.
Absolutely. And I was reading somewhere that if you take all the viruses in the world together, and this is serious, the total weight of that virus is just 1 gram, which is changing the world right now overall.
Yeah.
Interesting observation. So fundamentally, even the smokestack industry is being affected by innovation. After all, Tesla is an entrepreneur who brought it up, and others, whether it's alternative modes of transportation um, or shared mobility, innovation takes place outside the large corporation in a big way.
Yeah.
Um, Mr. Tata, coming back to again the entrepreneur who's building, we saw entrepreneurs going to many crores worth of revenues, and then when the lockdown happened, going down to zero because there was a physical interface. And then of course some of them are coming back as the lockdown hopefully starts moving, opening up, and in some cases digital revenues start ramping up. We are seeing that on the ground. However, the entrepreneur still has to do this choice of business priorities versus the human side of things, as you mentioned it earlier. So what, any thoughts on how to balance this? Because there is cost efficiency required, there is a business requirement, but you can't afford too long because the cash runway may be small. How do you balance the business part with the human things?
I'd like to say that that's something I can't answer generally, because I think you have to be looking at individual businesses and the leading entrepreneurs that are driving those businesses. In many cases, the innovation or the change is driven by the innovativeness of the entrepreneur rather than the change is sitting to be undertaken.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things you have mentioned in your statements the last few minutes correctly indicate that the opportunity is there. Somebody has to see the opportunity, package it in a manner that makes sense, debug it, and push it forward. So whether you look at music done by Apple, or whether you look at an electric car from a non-car manufacturer, you look at power grid distribution, decentralized power, as Tesla is doing to the home, and you look at delivery of medicines and doctor examinations, a synthetic general practitioner, if you might. You look at the input of data from the patient to the doctor.
Doctor, yeah.
On your wrist or on some decoder somewhere on your body. You look at remote medicine and surgery, it's there. Today, it's surgery through manipulators, but tomorrow it could be sitting in San Francisco doing surgery in Bombay. So it's how far can you stretch the envelope? And I think what you're looking at and what you're experiencing is there's no limit to that envelope, which a few years ago we kept saying we stretched it to its limits.
Right.
That doesn't hold true today.
And that's precisely the opportunity.
And that's the opportunity, but a hard thing to say is that the virus today has an issue of generating those questions and forcing them on us. Otherwise, we would go along until there was a more enterprising entrepreneur who thought it. I think we have to look at this as an opportunity to do something that is more innovative than we would have done in 2020. Yeah.
Do you think India as a country with entrepreneurship and the technology around entrepreneurs you see right now presents to investors globally and in India, in essence, possibly a bigger opportunity in the next few years?
I think it's not limited to India. It's I say what I'm about to say, I say with some degree of concern. You compare the situation we're in to a world war, which was destructive. Cities got bombed, manufacturing industries were disabled, and yet it was in those times that many new technologies were developed. Science was taken to a new height.
Right.
Out of it came rockets, came other forms of enterprise and forms of destruction. Both were an issue of application, but they were entrepreneurs who were supported by their governments to open new doors, if you mind. That could be the case again.
Absolutely.
It's not a world war, but it's like a world war. There's a dramatic need for vaccines. There's a dramatic need for solutions. And strange things happen. I think we really have to look back and say, where did so-and-so innovativeness really have its roots? Quite often, it has its roots at a time of crisis.
Right.
And we have a crisis on our hands today. And so there's an initial throw your hands up, you have this crisis, and then there's our own innovativeness that comes to play. That's the time we need to support, to invest, to not dismiss something as being too far out, but being something we should look at.
Absolutely. And you mentioned governments, and any thoughts? Governments can play a major role. Countries are collaborating, corporations are collaborating more, entrepreneurs are collaborating. Any thoughts on how government can actually support this?
Yes. To take an example, if you look at the US, And you look at what organizations like DARPA have done as government, supporting new technologies in biotechnology or in um, uh, integrated circuits or in a total variety of things. The government has supported $3, $4, $5 billion, which the private sector would not have been able to do. They have ushered in new industries because of their ability to come up with the funds earmarked for a particular uh, development. And if we had, at a time like this, had a way of marshaling some funds in certain areas, we could have another wave of innovativeness arising out of a problem, just like we've had in World War II,
Yeah.
or the Cold War. And look at the plus side of that, it caused innovation to take place, which would perhaps not have happened or taken much longer to do than they have done.
They have done. Yes, absolutely. And I think government is playing a role, and you're aware of the fact that uh, government is supporting the venture capital industry through SIDBI, which is like a sovereign fund of funds in the market. But absolutely, if it's bigger and better, this is like R&D. Tech is like R&D, so it takes a little bit of time to come out, but more is always good. In some sense, technology entrepreneurs, do you think, can be GDP additive in this scenario? In a 3, 4, 5 year time frame?
Yes, it can, but I don't think, I think some things are being driven, like the vaccines, fighting for time to solve a problem.
Yes.
But many of the other areas are one that needs patient capital. One very important thing that I believe has taken place is R&D earlier was in silos. You had electrical engineering or mechanical engineering or biology, and they have come together. Biology has become life sciences. Electronics has been part of it. Manufacturing techniques have started to use digital technology to make things better, to go from millimeters to microns. And today, successful R&D is multidisciplinary. And many things that we see today would not be there if they were in silos today.
Absolutely.
So maybe there's a new phase of what we have to look at, which today are not silly, they make sense, but there's another page to be turned to deliver something that was not considered possible.